Just so you know, I think of this as, I mean, they're always your kid, obviously, but the struggles that parents go through, sometimes I get phone calls, you know, I'm sorry, you filming, just so I know.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
You're from like the whole front of the room.
That's fine. Your kid is your kid till they're launched. Parents sometimes call and say, oh, I hope it's not too late, he's already 17. I've had parents of kids much older than that. So that's why I always ask who's in the room, okay? I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself because I think it's always nice to know who's speaking to you. I am a mental health professional. I'm also a board-certified ADHD coach. Now, how many of you know what the profession of ADHD coaching is? As I suspected. Okay. I'll tell you a little bit about what that means. What I found years ago is, as much as I knew about mental health and working counseling and everything else, kids with ADHD don't always need therapy, but they do very often need support. They do often need additional strategies and tools and perspectives and everything else. So when I originally went back and decided to get trained as an ADHD coach, and it is actually a full training, you get trained in life coaching and then specifically in ADHD and the brain and how it impacts learning and behavior, my original goal was to work with the high school kids and the college kids. But what I found was, as much as I was able to work with these kids, if the parents didn't understand what the parents didn't understand, I wasn't always getting very far. That parents really need to be the center of the support very often. You need your own understanding. So that's when I kind of switched gears and created my own profession of ADHD parent coaching. After doing that for several years, and I'll kind of weave in a little bit about that when I talk tonight, I then found, well, this is great. My parents are saying, wow, this is great. I really understand my kid. I'm going into school. I'm trying to advocate. And what are they finding? That the teachers didn't know what the teachers didn't know. Now, just so you know, my daughter is a special education teacher. I have a very special place in my heart for teachers. This is not about the teachers don't know what to do. The reality is, anyone here a teacher, by the way? Okay. How much did you learn about ADHD in your original teacher training? Very little, if anything. And did you learn anything about executive function? Okay. So the thing is, it's not necessarily part of their original training. So many times, and I appreciate that the school brings people in, that's why I started doing my teacher training, to help them get the knowledge that they need to really make a difference in the kids. Okay? I love the wraparound support that everyone can get. I think that's enough about me. You probably read this by now. I did write a book, which is kind of fun to say. I read a book. And it's really based on my parent coaching workshop series. Okay, so tonight I am going to give you just an overall look at my top 10 strategies for parenting these kids. But really what I want is an opportunity for you to ask your questions. So if you have a question, don't feel like you have to wait until the end. I promise if it's getting us off track, I will get us back on track, okay? Feel free to ask whatever questions you have, all right? But let's start with number 1, which is ADHD, beyond the basics, okay? What are the basics? If I say ADHD, what do you think of? What's the main criteria? What do you usually think of? Anyone?
Impulsivity.
Impulsivity, good. What else?
Attention deficit.
Attention deficit, yep.
Hyperactivity.
Hyperactivity.
Distractibility.
Distractibility, right? Inattentiveness, hyperactivity, impulsivity. Those are the 3 main areas, right? But it is actually a complex condition. And in fact, it's highly hereditable. Why does that matter? Why is it important to know that it's highly hereditable? So you guys can all feel guilty that you gave it to your kids? No. Why is it important to know? Anyone? Did you know it's highly hereditable? I mean, like about 50% or so? Why is that important to know?
Because we all did okay.
Sorry?
It's uplifting. We all did okay.
You all did okay. That's
Positive.
a good positive strength-based approach. I like that. Although, unfortunately, I can say that there's a lot of people that didn't and aren't yet doing okay. But that has to do with whether they've gotten appropriate treatment. And we'll talk about what that means. But why else is it important to know?
Parents will look at it in themselves, maybe.
You might see it in yourself, right? And also,
You can
when,
learn from it.
sorry?
You can learn from it.
You can learn from it, you can learn from your kids can learn from you, yeah?
You can identify it earlier if you know it's in you or your partner. You can see it
Well,
earlier.
You can see it earlier, yeah, sometimes.
If you don't have the skills yourself, it's going to be very difficult for you to teach your child or recognize the skills.
Yeah, if you didn't hear that, I'll say it a different way. Mrs. Smith, Johnny's having a really hard time keeping organized. Can you go home and organize him? Mrs. Smith is saying, and who's coming home and organizing me, right? So in other words, the challenge that the parent might be having, they may not even have recognized in themselves that that's ADHD. They may just think, oh, I'm just never good at this stuff, right? So we want to help everyone understand that it's the whole system, right? Okay. And approximately 11% of school-age children have ADHD. That's a big number, right? That means in every class, there's usually at least one kid with ADHD, which is why I'm so passionate about doing as much teacher training as I can do. Because I know that the majority of these kids are in the regular education system. They're not in the special education system, or if they are, they're working mostly in mainstream and maybe having additional services. And 85% of adults with ADHD are undiagnosed. 85%. So in other words, 85% of the people who would qualify for a diagnosis aren't necessarily diagnosed. That's a big number, which means that we really have gone a long way. In fact, I'm not going to talk too much about women and ADHD, but since this is largely a group of women, I will say this. We used to think that the rate was much bigger, the difference between men and women, but what we're seeing as more and more people are getting appropriately diagnosed, that the difference isn't quite as great, but guess what happened? In women, a lot of the women have gone undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. You know what they've been misdiagnosed with? Depression or anxiety, okay? Which means the medications they're taking, the self-image you have of yourself, all of that. So it's really important. I'm getting ahead of myself, talking about diagnosis, we'll get there, but it's really important to understand that this isn't just a childhood disorder, okay? And the debate is over. It is real, okay? There is no doubt. All of the major medical organizations have all signed off and said, yes, this is a real disorder. This is not a myth. This is just not, you know, the kid isn't trying, the kid doesn't care, okay? There are 3 presentations of ADHD, predominantly inattentive, which is what we used to call ADD. Then we've got the hyperactive and impulsive, and then we have the everything combined type. Anyone know, by the way, what this was called? What did we used to call it? Like, forget diagnosis. When you were going to school growing up, what did you used to call these kids?
Daydreaming and
Daydreaming,
distractible.
distractible. What else?
Hyper.
Hyper. What else?
Bad kid.
Bad kids. Class clown, lazy, unmotivated, right? Lots of nice names. Anyone know what this was called before it was called ADD? Because now it's all called ADHD. Anyone know what it was called before it was called ADD? Minimal brain dysfunction. Yeah, right? We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. I promise you, and I do this, you know, in my workshop series. I spend the first session of my 7-session workshop series is all about really going, you know, deep and dirty on what ADHD is and executive function and everything else. And by the end of that hour, we all agree that the name of this disorder makes absolutely no sense. Okay? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We've already said a lot of the kids are not what? Hyperactive, right? So it's not just that triangle on the top of the inattentiveness, hyperactivity, impulsivity. It's really what lies beneath that has you guys out here tonight, I'm sure. Okay. Deficits in executive function skills. I am not going to have time to go through all of what executive functions are, but I want to explain just generally. How many of you are familiar with that term? Okay, so a lot of you are familiar with that term, which is great. When I did this 10 years ago, I would have had maybe 2 hands raised. So it's good that we're starting to understand this. The executive functions are located in the front part of your brain. The brain develops, by the way, from the back of the brain to the front of the brain, so it's the last part of the brain to develop. And it's basically what coordinates what you do. So it's not about intelligence, it's about the performance, the organizing, the planning, the initiation, all of those different things, okay, that have to do with your executive function skills. A lot of times people are calling me now, my kid doesn't have ADHD, he has executive function deficits. Guess what? You cannot be diagnosed with executive function deficits. It is not in that diagnostic statistical manual, the DSM, okay? We can assess for it, we can evaluate it, we can learn a lot about a kid and make some accommodations and modifications, and we should, but it's not a diagnosis. And in fact, you should know that if you have ADHD, by definition, you've got deficits in executive function skills. You can't have ADHD without having challenges in executive function skills. Having said that, you can have deficits in executive function skills without having ADHD. Okay? All right. Up to 30% delay, what does that mean? You know how you're wondering, man, Johnny's so smart. I mean, he packed up his backpack at the beginning of the year anyway. And now it's a mess. Why isn't he packing up his backpack? He's in 5th grade. He should know how. He's smart enough. I've taught him. 30% delay means that it's not a delay in their intelligence. It's a delay in their executive functioning, those things that are helping him do what he intends to do. Does that make sense? So when you think about your kid, you may want to subtract about a year or two, depending on their age, and you know, it's different for everybody, and maybe that's around where they're performing. Again, they may be getting all A's, A pluses. This is not about the intelligence. This is about all those other things that are probably making you stressed and come out on a Tuesday night. Okay. The next thing is deficits in emotional self-regulation. These are the kids that can go from 0 to 100 like that. Their ability to regulate their emotions is what usually gets them in the most trouble. And it's not that their emotions are wrong. This is not a mood disorder. It's their ability to regulate it. When I do my parent workshop, one of the things we work on the most is, I always say, it's like the emotions are all over here, but they're spilling out before they had time to kind of get them in order. We need to help them learn to regulate their emotions before they let them out, okay? So deficits in emotional self-regulation is what a lot of these kids are really most challenged with. Sound like the kids we're here to talk about? I'm seeing a lot of nodding, okay. All right, there is also, and I don't need to tell you this, there's an understimulation in the brain when they're bored. But there really is, okay? So I'm going to show you something. I'll pass a few of these out just so you can try them. Here, let me take them, just sort of, here, let me get half on that side. Sorry. Just take one and pass, and just going to demonstrate something for you. By the way, have the fidget spinners been banned in the school district? No? Good. Good. They should not be. I'll explain why. Okay. So, can't they just sit still and pay attention? I mean, really. Come on. They're big kids. They know they're supposed to. Can't they just sit still and pay attention? Well, for these kids, it's more like sit still and fall asleep. Because at the core of ADHD, what it is, it's a below normal stimulation in the dopamine and norepinephrine, in the transmitters dopamine and norepinephrine, when they are not interested. So imagine, remember that screen I showed you that had the brain and all that activity going on? If you look at a brain scan, you can see a difference between a brain that has ADHD and a brain that does not. Now, I never suggest spending the thousands of dollars you can spend to get a brain scan. We can learn all of that by doing a proper diagnosis. But the fact of the matter is, when they are bored, when they're not intrinsically interested, their brain may be a little sleepy. It might be like, okay guys, let's wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, get dressed and go fold laundry. You all with me? Yeah, it wouldn't get you really activated. At least not me, okay? So I'm going to show you a little bit about fidgeting. Now, anything could be a fidget. My hair could be a fidget, right? My clothes. This, by the way. You were all laughing when, these were up here, like, oh, I just want to show you, this is a great fidget. What do? While I'm sitting here, I get to move around. And by the way, it's really good for your core and your posture too, okay? But this is a fidget. I love that you have a bunch of them here because then any old kid can use it without being labeled, oh, these are for those kids, right? Because that's what goes on. In the elementary schools, a lot of elementary schools have plenty of these little ball chairs and the kids use them, but then when they get to middle school, they're not there. Yeah.
What do you do when the fidget toy becomes the distraction?
That's what I'm going to teach you now. I'm going to have a sip of water, excuse me. Okay, so here's what I want to teach you. I can fidget. I can hold this. I can talk to you guys, no problem. I'm listening. I'm talking. I'm not losing my concentration at all. Okay? This is in my secondary focus. This is in the background. But if I were to take this and I would say, wow, this is so cool. This would make a really neat pretzel. Am I fidgeting? No. What am I doing? I'm playing. This became my primary focus. This became a toy. Okay? I'm no longer fidgeting, I'm playing.
Right.
The next thing is this. I can talk to you guys, no problem. Is this a problem for anyone? Right? Or if I go like this, I can talk to you guys, right? Or you see those pen caps where they're all broken off. Anyone have those? The pen caps, like the things that, yeah. So we need to help kids understand their brain. It's not enough just to give a kid a tool. We want to help everybody, and I always suggest when I do my teacher trainings that the teacher should have a box of fidgets in every classroom, kindergarten up to 12th grade, box of fidgets. Hey, guys, here's the deal. Everyone learns differently. Everyone performs differently. Some people actually do better if they move around. No problem. Let's talk about some basic ground rules. It's got to be in the secondary focus, not the primary focus. Can't be a distracting or disruptive. Use whatever language you need to at the ages, obviously. Okay? And there you go. Yes?
If an ADHD person has impulse control, they're not going to have the ability to be able to say, this is remaining in my secondary focus and take it away from my primary focus. They also often have this hyper-focus thing, where not only does it become the primary focus,
It becomes the only focus.
Right.
Right.
And so now, in other words, you're asking him or her to make a decision that they're often not capable of in that particular moment in time, even though you front-loaded the situation with all of these very nice, reasonable requests.
Right. Absolutely. Everyone hear her okay, by the way? Okay.
Sorry.
So, no, you did great. I just want to know if I should repeat. Okay, so let me comment on a few things you said, and one of them, forgive me, I always wait until someone says it. I'm not trying to nail you. Person first language is very important. The kids are not their disability. It's not the ADHD kids. I hear this all the time. It's the kids with ADHD. It's not the autistic kids. It's the kids with autism. It's part of who they are. We have to worry about this from the get-go. We're trying to help them understand who they are, but we're really trying to help them realize that it's just part of who they are, okay? So that's one little thing I just want to tweak for everybody. Now, in terms of what you were saying, and absolutely, impulse control is going to get in the way, but this is a learning process. This is not an overnight solution. This is about engaging with the child and helping them raise their own self-talk, which, by the way, is an executive function skill, that whole metacognition, thinking about what you're thinking about. We want to help them understand themselves. So it's not about, well, you didn't use that right, let me take it away. That's why this, by the way, is an article that I wrote. Oh, I forgot. I'm going to send this around. I have a few articles I can email everybody. So if you please write neatly so that we can read it. You can join my newsletter, and I send out just tips and strategies. If you want to, unsubscribe after you get the first one, I won't take it personally. It's okay. But at any rate, there's an article that I wrote when the fidget spinners were first coming out, and they were all the rage, and then all these schools started banning them. It was one of my articles that actually went viral because what I wrote was, don't ban the fidget, teach the skill. And the thing is, we have to help the kids learn about their impulsivity, learn about how to strategize, learn how to problem solve. Maybe this fidget is too interesting for them. Maybe we need to find another one that's going to work differently. It's not going to be a quick solution. It's going to be a process. And honestly, other things can be a fidget. Like I said, this can be a fidget, okay? Standing up on the side of the classroom can be a fidget instead of sitting. Chewing gum can be a fidget. There's lots of things that can be a fidget. Some things you're going to not be able to do in the classroom, but you can do at home. How many of your kids like listening to music when they do their homework? And how many of you think, oh, I don't want them to listen to music, I was going to do this homework, right? Here's the thing. For that kid, music might be, in essence, a fidget. Rather than taking it away, check it out with them. Hey, I see you like to listen to music. How does that work for you? Is there certain music that is more, easier for you to use than others? Maybe you want to make a playlist or whatever else. Whatever they're doing, it's about helping them learn about themselves. Because you know what? They're never going to have Mrs. Goldrich, the best teacher they ever had, again. I need them to be ready for the next class, the movie, church, synagogue, wherever they are. I need them to be able to function anywhere. Make sense? Another question? Yeah.
Would a fidget be, I guess, picking your nails down to the quick all the time?
Yes. Yes. Now, obviously, if they're doing something that's maybe damaging themselves and that's their fidget, then we're going to have to help them replace it. See, the mistake a lot of people make is they want to take that away. Stop doing that, right? I could even say the same thing, by the way, about pot. Stop smoking pot, because a lot of people use pot for the wrong reasons, right? We have to understand what purpose is it serving them so that we can gradually help them find something to replace that purpose with that's more appropriate. Is there another hand up? No? Okay. All right. Oh, I love this. Okay, Johnny, you come down for dinner in 5 minutes? And Johnny doesn't come down. What assumption do we make about Johnny? Come on. Huh? He's not listening. He's fooling around. You guys are so nice. What else? He's being defiant, right? He's being challenging. He doesn't care. He's being difficult. All of that might be true.
He's found an iPhone.
All of that might be true. But here's the other thing that might be true. Johnny's sense of time may not be as accurate. Research has shown us that people with ADHD, whether or not they're on medication, their internal clock is not necessarily as accurate. Now, I know some of you are sitting there thinking, I know I have ADHD, and boy, I'm always late, or I'm always early, because isn't that the same problem? Right? A lot of people are always early because they're just not estimating how long it takes. Or the person that's always late and then is surprised, I can't believe I'm late, I left him plenty of time, right? So that's what happens. So anyone here, your kid spends way too long in the bathroom? Yeah. And how many of you have clocks in the bathroom? Not as many people have said that they spend too long in the bathroom. Here's the thing. Anytime you are going to give a kid, or an adult, a time-oriented task, you must give them something to measure that time with. I'm going to show you what I like, okay? This is called a time timer. You can get these on Amazon. I have them here. It's very low tech. It comes in all different sizes. You can get it as a 3-inch clock, right? You can get it as this size. You can get it as a wall clock. You can get it as an app on the smartphones, on the smart boards. Here's how it works. If I say, okay, bus is coming in 15 minutes, how different, if I set a digital clock, how different does 15 minutes feel than 10 minutes? Not so different. Watch. If I set this clock for 15 minutes, and it doesn't make a tick, tick, tick sound, it just dings at the end, then gradually you see the passage of time, right? So now they could just glance over and they're seeing the passage of time. I can't tell you how many parents have said this has changed their lives. That mornings are smoother, that the bathroom time's smoother, that getting dressed in the morning is smoother, that homework, all of these things. Because now you're not constantly saying anything, they're just looking over and they're seeing it. In fact, I always tell teachers, next to that box of fidgets, you should have a box of time timers. And that way we don't, again, I don't want the spotlight on these kids, because all kids are going to benefit from this anyway, right? I would say just put a few time timers out anytime there's a task, and then the kids have it. Those that really need it are going to look at it more than the others. Make sense? Okay. Very low tech, just has a little battery, and got them up here. And we'll just put it down there. Okay. Anyway. So there you go. Any question on that, or does this make sense to you guys? Okay, so my strategy number one, I said we were going to do 10 things, is you've got to get fully educated. This is just a little bit of what you need to know when you've got a kid with ADHD. Okay, it's so important you get fully educated. The next thing, diagnosis and treatment. I'm going to give you some broad things here, but feel free to ask questions. Proper diagnosis. Why does it matter? I mean, can I at this point just go to Google and go to one of those checkoffs and, oh, yep, that's ADHD. Can I do that? Why shouldn't I do that? Well, we have to see what could mimic ADHD. Anyone know what could mimic? I'm not talking about things that go along with. I'm not talking about coexisting conditions. What could make it look like someone has ADHD but they don't? Anyone know?
Sleep issues.
Sleep issues, yep, sleep apnea.
Thyroid issues.
Sorry, thyroid issues.
Anxiety. Anxiety.
Anxiety can make it look like ADHD. It also can go along with. In fact, all of those things can go along with. What else?
Processing speed issues.
That would be maybe a sign of, or could go along with. Things like Crohn's, severe allergies. Okay, lots of different things. Do y'all know what PANDAS is? Okay, PANDAS. I always forget. Pediatric immune. Someone help me out here.
Well, I know.
You can get it from strep. Okay, if you have a child who, after an episode of strep, their behavior drastically has changed, you may want to talk to the doctor and see if it's PANDAS. Okay. Unfortunately, many doctors are still unaware, although it's getting better, but that's something else, okay? So we need to really see, is it ADHD? Who can diagnose ADHD? Who can do the diagnosis? Anyone know? Developmental pediatrician. Who else? Neurologist. Psychologist. Psychiatrist. Neuropsychologist. The fact of the matter is there are lots of different professions that can do a diagnosis. The key is you want someone who's truly up to date, accurate, really knows their stuff. Okay? It is not a diagnosis, and I will tell you I've heard these things firsthand. To go to a pediatrician and say, my kid's getting in trouble at school, I have trouble with him at home. Pediatrician says, well, it sounds like it might be ADHD. Here's a script. If it works, it's ADHD. That's not a diagnosis. That is a hypothesis. Yes?
I know they talk about like.
I'm sorry, just a little louder.
I know they talk about like the proper age that you should diagnose it, and some kids are diagnosed earlier. I mean, do you feel like there's a hard line, like you can't diagnose it before 5, or you need to see how a child does?
So you're asking about the age of diagnosis. The fact of the matter is that according to the DSM, you can diagnose by age 4. You have to see evidence of it by age 14. Now, what does that mean with adults? To diagnose an adult with ADHD, you have to look back at their childhood. There has to be evidence that it existed in childhood. Okay? But to answer your question about what age, I would say if you suspect things are going on, you're going to want to have some preliminary conversations. The doctor may not be ready to do a full diagnosis yet. You may want to red flag them and say, hey, let's keep an eye. Some of it may still be developmental, or some of it may be, and this is not about blame, but some of this may be about parenting, okay, and setting up certain things, that would be helpful, okay? But there are parents who can tell you in utero, I know this kid's got ADHD. I mean, there are kids, most of the time I get the phone call, my kid's been diagnosed with ADHD, but I don't want to use medication, will you work with me? And the answer, by the way, is of course I'll work with you. I don't diagnose, I don't medicate. My job is education and support. Okay? I'm going to help parents really understand all of that. But I do occasionally get the phone calls from the parents who say, I'm so excited, my kid was just diagnosed with ADHD and now I can give him medication. Now that may sound horrible, but here's the thing. If you've got a 3-year-old who's dashing off and running into the street, you know, it's so easy to judge those parents who have the leashes on their kids, but trust me, I've known these kids. When they are that impulsive, that hyperactive, that they can be a danger to themselves and others, sometimes it's a relief at a very young age to say, hey, wow, there's something I can do. Okay? Yeah.
Don't urologists, psychologists, all the different people who you can get a diagnosis through use different tools to get to a diagnosis? And if that is the case, how do you know which one to go to? So,
That's a great question. So here's the thing. I wish, and I know many people who are trying to work toward it, I wish we had one protocol that this is how we're going to diagnose. I'm actually working with some people, believe it or not, in Pakistan who are contacting me and they said, okay, what should we use to diagnose?
Right.
Like everyone's what are we doing?
Right.
Okay? That's why, even though we know that ADHD is real, you can see it in the brain and everything else, there are a lot of different ways to get at it. And that's why I say you want to go to a professional. Now, how do you know a professional really knows? You can ask a few questions. What do you do for the, how do you diagnose? What age do you see? How do you diagnose an adult? And just keep asking them a bunch of questions that are going to help you kind of assess, who they are. But there is no unified protocol at this point. I wish there was. What's involved in a diagnosis? Well, oops, sorry, I went ahead, but what's involved in a diagnosis? There must be, like I said, we could do that checkoff, right? And I'm sure many of you have seen the Connors or whatever else, your school is using where you're filling out something and the teacher's filling out something. One of the most important things is a full family history, okay? We really need to see this child in the context of their whole family and what's really going on, all right? And we want to do some of these other checkups, and we want to rule out any kind of medical issues. Now, what makes up a treatment plan? Medication, sometimes. I will tell you that 80% of kids, according to the latest statistics, do well when on medication. But having said that, it is a very complex, very personal decision. And it changes as the years go on. All right? And just like going to someone who is expert in diagnosis, you must go to someone who is expert and current in medication, because it could take up to 6 months to find the right medication. It's trial and error, unfortunately. We don't yet know, by looking at someone and doing their weight and their age and all of that other stuff, what medication they should be on. But medication can be part of it. Therapy, sometimes, okay? But all the therapy in the world is not going to help a kid understand why they can't focus. Why? Because it's a neurobiological disorder. Coaching, as I said, coaching can be very helpful. I want to set the right expectation. Coaching in general is really about helping develop the self-talk, the self-awareness. Young kids aren't ready yet for coaching. Many of them are ready for, and on Long Island, I don't have anyone trained out here yet, but on Long Island I have teachers who have gone through my full-day professional training who I do additional training with to be tutors. So I call them kind of tutors who get it, tutors who really understand these kids. They understand executive functioning, how to work with all of that. So maybe at the younger ages you want someone who can work with them on the academics, but also understands the executive functioning, okay? As they get older, and I'm talking like later high school, college, when they're really ready to say to you, you know what, and adults too, by the way, there are plenty, and that I can recommend to you. The field of ADHD coaching for adults is a really growing field, because once you're an adult, once you have that self-talk going, and you say, hey, you know what, I mean well, I just can't get myself organized. I don't seem to follow through. I'm still running late. I have all these projects. I want to be more productive. How can I do this? That's where the ADHD coach can be side by side. Okay? So that's coaching. And of course, parent coaching, what I'm doing with the parents is helping with tips and tools and strategies and support. And of course, parent education. Okay, number 3 is your perspective. I suggest a disability perspective. Now, I have a very strength-based approach. I really do believe that should not be called a disorder. I'd like it to be called a difference, because the fact of the matter is, and I don't mean this in an autistic way, we're all on a spectrum. You know what I mean? It's like, where is that fine line? We're all different. We all learn, act, everything differently. But having ADHD is a challenge. We have to recognize that. We can't just say, listen, you know, I know you have a hard time processing really quickly, but you got to hurry up today. You can't ignore the diagnosis, okay? You want to see their strengths and not just their weaknesses. I want you to write this down if anyone's taking notes. One of my favorite quotes. What you pay attention to grows. I'm going to say that again. What you pay attention to grows. If you're always paying attention to their weaknesses, guess what you're always going to see? Their weaknesses. And guess who else is always going to see their weaknesses? They are. Okay? You've got to be paying attention to their strengths as much, if not more. You want to see the world through your child's eyes. And unconditional love to offset the reprimands and the reminders that they're getting all day long. And parent the child you have. That's the philosophy that I have throughout my work. That's the introductory chapter to my book. Not the child you thought you'd have, not the child you wish you'd have, not the child you'd have if your mother-in-law got her way, but the child you've been blessed with, right? Yeah, you know, if you just did it my way, you're just not structured enough, right? I was really strict, you're not strict enough. The thing is, strict in what way, right? Which brings us to our parenting skills. Logic. Anyone try logic, by the way? How's that been working for you? And extra love doesn't do it either. I know you love your kids. I mean, look at this. You're out here with me. It's not about that. It's not that you don't care. And patience is crucial, but even that's not always enough. And strict rules are not going to solve everything. We have to parent the child we have. What are the strict rules I need to have for my child in these kind of settings? And how do I know? So that's why I think you need a black belt in parenting. You need ADHD-specific tips, tools, strategies, and knowledge. Okay? Number 5, the home environment. Well, life inside their heads is often pretty chaotic, right? And they don't have an internal sense of time, as I said, or order. They need a calm environment. Now, I'm sure this doesn't go on in your homes. Will you just calm down? Right? That's why my workshop, by the way, is called Calm and Connected. Because my parents learned that without calm, guess what? We're not learning anything. Nothing's happening. We've got to start with calm. And they do need structure. But again, what kind of structure? And they need support at the point of performance. What does point of performance mean? That means you can't be yelling, hey Johnny, do me a favor, come on down and pack up your backpack, get your shoes, get the tennis racket. How's that working for you guys? And there's reasons why that's not working, but the point is, if you want them to succeed, you have to maybe be there to guide them through a little more. I know it's frustrating. You're thinking, oh my God, he's already in 10th grade. I'm still doing this? I promise. We can build the skills so that you're not constantly doing that. But if you want them to succeed, you got to meet them where they are. And they are going to look to test the limits. Any of your kids test the limits? You got to make sure you have it. Okay, your child's lens. What do they know about ADHD? Do they know if they have ADHD? I've had parents who have kids who are 8 and 9 years old taking a vitamin. Okay, guess what? Something in them knows that they're not taking a vitamin. We need to help them understand. We don't want them to think this is something horrible that we can't talk about, because then guess what? They start to think badly about themselves, and then they feel like nobody will talk to me, so this must be really bad, right? There must be something really wrong with me. We need to allow it to be safe for them. Having said that, what age do you start talking about ADHD? Parent the child you have. Some really young kids who are ready to learn that term, Some older kids are not necessarily ready. But I would say that by the time your kid's about 10 or 11 years old, they've learned something very special, and that is how to Google. And I promise you, if they're feeling like something's up, chances are they're starting to try to find out what's up, okay? Or they're hearing it on the playground, or they're hearing it from, somewhere else. So keep that in mind, okay? You want to teach them about the brain. Of course, there's a school in New Jersey I've been consulting. This is, I think, my 5th year consulting. And I've gone in the middle school, and I teach all the kids about the brain and how learning happens. I mean, kids have to understand this. All kids. Again, we don't want that spotlight. We want them to see so that they start to feel empowered. How do they feel about having ADHD? How's their self-care? What's self-care? Self-care is nutrition, exercise, and sleep. Why is that so important? Is it more important for kids with ADHD? No, it's important for all kids. But the thing is, when you have a kid who has ADHD who hasn't slept well, or who hasn't gotten any movement, or who isn't eating well, probably it's even harder for them to regulate their emotions. By the way, no one's asked me yet about diet. Here's the thing. There is no special diet that is going to help with ADHD. If you are putting your kid on a gluten-free diet, that's fine. If they have a gluten allergy, it's not necessarily going to help them with ADHD. The only thing we're seeing, and there's not yet agreement on, the dose or anything else, is the fish oils, right? The omega-3s, okay? I'm not saying it's not worth experimenting with things, but there is no special diet that's going to be a cure. What is their role in their treatment? Again, we want them to be partners with us. Do they know how they learn best? Do they know what their rights are? Why is that so important that they know what their rights are?
So they can advocate for themselves?
So that they can advocate. Thank you. But here's the thing about advocacy. Advocacy is a developmental skill. Whether the kid's in kindergarten, again, or 12th grade, they may need support in being able to advocate for themselves. It's not enough to just say, you should go speak to the teacher. Because for that kid, that may be like 5 steps ahead of where they're comfortable. You've got to meet them again where they are, okay? So can they advocate for themselves? And do they see their own interests and talents and passions as gifts and possibilities to be nourished? We can't be rushing them along and saying, sorry kiddo, no soccer this semester, you've got too much work. They need the outlet. They need those areas that they can feel good about themselves. We've got to let them have those balances. All right? Yes?
Is there a connection between OCD and ADHD at all?
OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder, is an anxiety disorder. I can tell you that the coexisting relationship between ADHD and anxiety is about 40 to 50%. So whether OCD within the anxiety is what's going on, but it's very often goes along. In fact, I think anxiety is in the room with these kids all the time. I think it's leading the train, actually, for a lot of these kids. And you see it, in the work that we do, you see how the anxiety really plays out. Family balance. Marriage and family relationships. The divorce rate in the special needs community is disproportionately higher. Why? Because they marry bad? No. Because the challenges that couples face, whether it's same-sex couples, heterosexual couples, the challenges that they face are much greater. Because look at how you're spending your evening, right? Look at all the things you have to deal with your spouse, with the differences that you have. So you must nurture the relationship, okay? And honestly, I think there's golden opportunities within it. Because you are getting to know yourself and your spouse in a way that you would not have had opportunities to otherwise. So it's not all negative, okay? There's a lot positive, but you got to pay attention to it. Other kids in the family, well, guess what? If John is a kid with ADHD and you're saying to Sally, the older sister, hey, you know what, we're going out and you watch Johnny. Sally may need her own support, okay? If you think you're having a hard time with Johnny, trust me, it's impacting Sally. She needs her own strategies, tools, time, everything else. All the kid knows is that, you know what, you're spending so much more time with Johnny. You sit with him when he's doing the homework, and you take him to all these places, and he walks out with all these fun stickers and everything else, while Sally's sitting in the waiting room doing her homework, right? So we need to really pay attention to the sibling experience as well. And your own self-care, of course, nutrition, exercise, and sleep. What do they say in the plane? Put the oxygen mask on you first, right? Time for your friendships, interests. A lot of parents get very isolated. One of the things that I love about my parent workshop series is parents for the first time are socializing with other parents who have kids with similar challenges, and then they form their own groups. Like you're forming your parent group is great. And the school connection. You must know your rights. Absolutely. Schools are obligated to provide students with ADHD equal educational opportunity under the 504. Okay? This was clarification that came out July 26th of last year. I don't know why that date sticks in my head, but it does. Okay? It was not a new ruling, but basically what it's saying is that an ADHD diagnosis, all right? Strong academic performance cannot rule out getting support for ADHD. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean every kid with ADHD needs special education. All right? But we need to start thinking about how we're working with these kids. Because unfortunately, what I see very often is in the young years, right, we're saying, well, your kid's getting all A's. He's doing fine, even though the parent is knowing, well, this is, we're having a lot of struggles. He's doing fine. I think by not helping that kid in the ways that we can, which so much of it can be done in the classroom, okay, that's again the teacher training piece of this, we're kicking the can down the road. We're just making it harder for them later on. These things are going to show up. One of these days we're going to do a longitudinal study of the kids that, where the parents asked to have services and were denied in the early years, and then see how many of these kids ended up with services in the later years. Okay? But never go alone to school meetings. Why? I am not advocating, by the way, that you bring a paid employee. I'm not saying you should bring an advocate or a lawyer or anything like that. I'm saying bring a friend, bring a sibling, okay? Why? Because these are emotional meetings. And what happens when you get emotional? What happens to your ability to hear things? You get shut down, right? You walk out of the meeting all overwhelmed, you realize you forgot to say something or whatever else. So always just bring someone with you. Keep accurate records. You never know what your kid's going to want to do. And I promise you, if they decide, college may take them 5-6 years. I'm not saying it's going to for all of them, okay, but it might. Or maybe 3 years later they decide they want to go to law school. And they're going to need accommodations and modifications for the LSATs, for the GMATs, whatever it is. To qualify for it, there needs to be a history of the disability. So you're going to want to keep good, accurate records. Okay? But work with the teachers. They are your allies. You need them, they need you. You've got to all work together. If you're having a hard time with the teacher, figure out why. Maybe they do need a little more education. Maybe they do need some more insight to your child. Try to work with the teacher. If you're having a hard time, I'm sure, whether it's the guidance counselor, social worker, whoever it is you need to go to, but you want to have that good, strong relationship. It's so vital. Appropriate accommodations. Include your kids' insights. A lot of these IEPs that I look at, the kids, supposed to get preferential seating. What does preferential seating usually mean, by the way? Huh? Right here. Right? By the way, I think that seat is the kiss of death for some of these kids. For some of them, it's a great seat. But for some of them, what are they spending their whole time doing? turning around looking at the back of the class, right? So you want to talk to the kid, because by talking to the kid, it's not just finding out what they want, because we have to make sure that what they want makes sense. It's about, again, I want them to be ready to go out into the world. I want them to understand the impact of choosing a seat, the impact of where you sit, how that impacts how you're paying attention. So when they do go off, let's say they go off to college, this kid knows, hey, you know what? I'm probably better off sitting over there, or I'm probably better off sitting over there. If we keep choosing and making them sit where we tell them, they're not learning about themselves. And circle of support, it truly does take a village, okay? But you are the chief and head coach. You've got to put together that team. But you need your own support and resources too. You're never alone in this, okay? Make sure everyone's working together for that common goal. You want to raise a resilient and confident child. It's not just about the grades. It's about, you know, my daughter, who I mentioned is a teacher, she is now in her 3rd year teaching. She teaches resource room in elementary school. And we're blessed. We get to talk every day. She's in Colorado, so when she's driving to school, we talk in the morning, what's going on. We're going to do a podcast one of these days between parent, coach, and teacher, because every day we're kind of solving some of the problems. And today's problem was, Mom, I've got these kids. I'm teaching them Orton Gillingham. You all know Orton Gillingham is the program that you use for kids who have dyslexia. By the way, we're allowed to say that on an IEP now, right? Do you all know that? As of this summer, you can now say dyslexia on an IEP, which is miraculous. At any rate, she said, but some of these kids, they give up so quickly. What do we do? And I talked to her about the whole growth mindset, and we put together whole nice little programs that she's starting to do with her kids. The thing is this, it's not just about getting them to get to that college. Because guess what? I get phone calls all the time. I don't know what happened. My kid got into the college of his dreams, did all through high school, he did fine, and now he's home on academic suspension. Because we have to get them ready to be independent learners, not just pass tests, okay? Which brings me to number 10, stay in the present. Remember that delay, okay? Don't worry, don't think too far ahead. Keep your expectations real and reasonable. Help them develop their interests and their talents and their passions. That's what's going to keep them going, okay? Let your dreams evolve as your child evolves. It's all about the relationship, which is why, again, the workshop is called Calm and Connected. They need you to be in there with them, okay? I always tell parents, never let your relationship suffer at the altar of homework. If you guys are battling about homework, that's your cue that you need support, okay? This is not just about pushing them up that mountain. All right, this, by the way, is about my workshop, in case anyone has questions about that. It is going to be starting, I do session 1 as a standalone. I never used to, that's why it's in red, because I really do believe that anytime a child is diagnosed with ADHD, parents must get education. So I now offer session 1 as a standalone session. I'm doing it, I forget the dates, it's all on my website. I'll send you out an email with it. But at any rate, so that's what that is about. And here's my contact information if anyone would like it. But now I'd like to hear whatever questions you guys have, and how can I support you? Yes?
You were mentioning that medication can be really helpful for kids with ADHD, but you also said that some people could have executive function issues without having ADHD. So is medication recommended for that, or is it more of the coaching
And that's where I
coping
get to
stuff?
say I'm not a diagnostician and I don't do medication. In general, I'm going to say probably not, okay? But I would definitely defer to a medical person for that.
Okay.
But just so you know, stimulant medication, when I say stimulants, I'm talking about like the Vyvanse, the Focalin, the Ritalin, all of those things. What it's doing literally is it's stimulating the underactive part of the brain. Remember I said the transmission of dopamine and norepinephrine? So if your brain is not underactive in that way, then not the same need for the medication. Other questions? I've either answered everything you ever thought about, or I've overwhelmed you all and you don't know where to start.
I have a question on helping them develop their interests and passions.
Uh-huh.
So how would you handle
the passion or the interest is playing the bass guitar, so we take bass guitar lessons. We don't ever practice, so the love is of the listening to music, playing it, but there's
How old is
nothing-
he?
11.
Okay. I understand.
And I don't want to fight about practicing,
Right.
but it's the
So here's the thing, and this is one of the things I do with parents all the time. We get caught up as parents in their passions. Whose job is it to make them happy and successful?
theirs.
Theirs. So we have to let it be theirs. You may put some rules and expectations around your willingness to pay for lessons and pay for guitars and things like that. But generally, when it comes to a passion like that, especially when they're 11 and it's your first kid, you think, wow, they're so old, they're 11. Trust me, that's like a blip, right? They may be getting exactly what they want out of what they're doing. That to them may be, I'm playing guitar and this is great. So, that's a little bit of it. There's more we can work on in that. But there's another hand somewhere. Yes?
Electronics.
Do we have to
The
talk about
elephant,
electronics?
I'm sorry. It's
Okay.
like, it's such a crutch. I have an Asperger's kid and ADD kid, sorry.
Kid with
Excuse me,
Asperger's.
yes, okay, and a kid with ADD. And it's such a crutch with the kid with Asperger's. And it's hard for me to tell the kid with ADD, oh, sorry, you have to go outside and play. Your brother is decompressing, but you have to go play. How do you
It is hard. Yeah.
time it out?
Are any of you familiar with the film Screenagers?
Yes.
Did you show it here? Or? Okay, yeah, because I'm going to be showing it on Long Island soon. It is a huge issue. Boy, I don't even know where to start with the whole thing. Except to say this. I am hopeful that the next generation of parents, and I'm seeing this now in my nephew who's got the little 2 and 4-year-old, they're already knowing I've got to restrict all this stuff from the beginning, right? A lot of us who have older kids, you're kind of caught off guard. We're all kind of catching up. They were already using it excessively before we even had those things ourselves, right? So there are a lot of things. It's about, again, just like I was saying before, I forget, I know we were talking before and I mentioned the pot and you had said something else. We have to see what purpose it's serving in their life before we think we can just take it away, okay? We have to do, it's about a whole collaborative approach with them and see, how can we work with them and gradually, this is not going to be like cold turkey. Although there are some people that do suggest cold turkey. There are experts now in the field of electronics and addictions, so. Suggest that. What else? Yes?
So we're talking about electronics and you're talking about calm, and then you have a high school student that has all of this homework, and all they want to do is sit and, catch up on the texts and the group meetings and whatever else the heck they do and house partying. But then there's homework to be done, and you say it 25 times, you've got to start your homework, you've got to start your homework.
Right.
1 sec, 1 sec, 1 sec.
Okay.
Hard to
So
wrestle
you're
with
saying
from a
he's got
10th
some,
grader.
just repeating it in case anyone can't hear here, and tell me if I'm repeating this correctly. When you talk about electronics and they get so addicted and then it's time for homework and you're saying 25 times it's time to start your homework time. That's what I mean when I say don't let your relationship suffer at the altar of homework. I'm going to suggest that there's a lot you could be doing around that 25 times that you're saying it, because the dance is never going to change. It's not like you're going to say, okay, Mom, fine. Right? So whether you could substitute playing Legos or reading a book or anything else for that electronics, it still may be the same problem. So that's why I say this is about parenting and how you work with the child around that. It's not just about,
Have advice of how to work with the child.
you know what, I have a lot of advice and I'm not trying to be coy, but this is not a one-line answer. This is a whole, that's what I do within the workshop. The reason I started doing a workshop, and parents know, they call me up and they say, I'm not a workshop person, can't you just work with, I'm still going to do the workshop with you. And the reason I say that is because I really need to help you understand more about what these challenges are, and then we need to break it down. We need to really look at communication and collaboration and setting boundaries and rules and expectations, and by enabling and by supporting all of those different things. Session 6 of 7 sessions is about consequences. And that's just to say that there's a lot we can do before we get there. So that's the thing, it's a whole process.
So do you do online workshops, or are you talking about coming back here?
Yes,
Or we can do
no, you don't all have to come out to Long Island, much as I'd love to have all of you. I offer it as a live interactive webinar, so I always do it in the morning and the evening. The morning class, I think, is 10:30 to 12. The evening class is 7 to 8:30. It's always the same. So in other words, if this week you can't make the morning, but you can make the evening, you can do it that way. And as a live interactive webinar, you get to, there's people in the room, and you get to talk and hear and participate. Yes?
Question, and maybe this is another one of those, you have to be in a workshop, but when you talk about working with teachers, how do you know where the right line is in terms of being over-involved or not helping enough?
You mean as a parent being
As a
over-involved?
parent, working with a teacher, I think that's the hardest for me, is to understand when to step in, when not to step in,
Right.
what's too much.
I would say err on the side of collaboration with the teacher and literally ask them that. The other thing I very often suggest is have a meeting with the parent and the teacher and the child together, because that transparency will go a long way toward the teacher and the parent being able to support the kid together and having the kid not try to work one off of the other. Oh, I can't, you can't sign off on, a lot of times kids will say, well, I have to stay up till 11 to 12 o'clock at night. I have to get my homework done. And you're like, no, you know what, I'll write a teacher a note, you've worked enough. No, I can't, I'll get in trouble. Well, let's have a meeting so we're all hearing the same thing at the same time, right? So err on the side of collaboration, and if you feel like you're not getting somewhere with the teacher, and that's why you're feeling like you feel like maybe you're overstepping, maybe that's your cue that you need to broaden the support at the school and broaden the conversation.
And if your kid isn't receptive to your collaboration with the teacher.
You know what? Sometimes the kid doesn't have a choice.
I agree.
And believe me, I'm all for I'm all for like wanting to make the kid happy and everything else, but at the same time, we still have to be the parents. We still have to be the adults, and it's not always easy, but it's how you do it.
So it's
And
okay
there's
when I
many
say
steps
take
you
care
can
of your,
take before.
and I won't have to.
Huh?
It's okay when I say you want to take care of your stuff and I won't have to talk to your teacher?
It depends on how you say it, and
I kind of say it like
and
that.
but what I mean is this. It depends on how response-able the kid is. See, we very often assume a kid is response-able, and they're not. And that's why I say we've got to meet them where they are. And that's why I say we've got to really understand them. And that's why we really need to really understand all the different ways that this is impacting their learning and their behavior, their brain, and everything else. We have to know them better. Yeah.
No.
Oh, just waiting.
Waiting.
Any other questions? Yes.
Are mood swings linked to anything, or are they random? I'm struggling with
Mood swings?
Yeah, like do you find them is it a neurotransmitter issue, or is it like
I can't
because
give you a
yelled at them,
technical answer. I can only tell you that mood swings, I think, happen with all people.
Well,
I think it can happen more with kids with ADHD and adults with ADHD because, again, the emotional dysregulation that can go on. So, they can be like that 0 to 100. But it's about, we have to help them learn to deal with that.
do you see kids with ADHD grow out of it? Like, my child's like middle school, so it's the hormonal time anyway. Like, how do you, I struggle with knowing like.
Yes. They very often they do mature. Absolutely. They may just mature more slowly.
And it's not logical. None of it's
Never logical. Yes.
I've heard that people outgrow.
I'm sorry.
I've heard that people outgrow the hyperactivity component. Generally, do you have any information about like percentages and around what age?
I don't know about percentages. I don't know about age in terms of outgrowing. She's asking outgrowing the hyperactivity. I can just tell you that, yeah, a lot of times, but sometimes it kind of switches. There are many people in professions that have just chosen professions that suit them. A lot of EMTs right? Who thrive on that adrenaline. A lot of salespeople. I mean, I'm just identifying two professions, and it doesn't mean that everyone's a salesperson has ADHD. What I mean is a lot of times that people are like on the go all the time because they just will not sit at a desk. So their hyperactivity may look different than when they were a kid, but it's still in them. They've just learned how
To deal with it.
to deal with it. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you all very much. I do have
Great.
big one. Okay? Big one.